and I'm here with Julia Miller, and we're going to be talking about soulmates. And for those of you who don't know us, I am a life coach, lawyer, and a mediator. And Julia is a volunteer single adult leader. She's also a realtor and a life coach. And we just enjoy having you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and so we're going to be talking about soulmates. Is there such a thing as having a soulmate or a soulmate just for you? And so, Julia, there's a young lady that I know, and she is just about 40 years old, but she's never been married. And, she really struggles with this issue. Is there such a thing as a soulmate? She's wondering, am I wasting my time? Is there such a thing? If so, am I going about it the right way? Am I being godly in the way that I'm kind of pursuing this in my life? And she's just wonderful. She loves the Lord. She has a great career. And, she's just wondering, hey, what is this? Am I doing something wrong, or am I wasting my time, or, how should I approach this?
Well, I think what you're asking is, we do see a lot of people come into the single adult ministry that have questions about, I would really like to be married. And it almost seems like they feel guilty for wanting to be married. There's something shallow about it. Of course, there's nothing shallow about it.
Yeah.
But the question becomes, okay, how do I go about finding my soulmate?
Mm-hmm.
They want to know, a lot of us feel like there's that one special person that's out there just for me. There's that one special person out there just for you. And how are we going to go about finding them? I want to find my soulmate. And so I think what was a friend of yours?
Yes.
She was concerned, kind of what I believe I hear her saying is that she realizes that, time is moving on here.
Yeah.
And as she's starting to get older, she hasn't had maybe the opportunity to meet somebody that she felt was her soulmate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And she wants to know whether or not there is even such a thing.
Right.
And so I think that's a very common question that we get is, I know that there's got to be a soulmate out there for me if it's God's will for me to be married, but I don't know if it's God's will for me to be married. And if it is, am I going about this in the right way? Some people are telling me that, I should just pray and I shouldn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Other people are telling me, you got to get out there, you got to date, you got to make this happen. Mm-hmm. And there's this confusion. There's this back and forth confusion about the whole thing. What we wanted to discuss tonight was just opening this up and seeing really what the two schools of thoughts are. There's that one side of the fence that says, just get out there, find somebody, and let's make it happen. There's this other school of thought, no, you don't need to do anything. God doesn't need your help. You just need to pray and let God bring that perfect person into your life, and there is that perfect person for you. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of where we're going with this, because we end up seeing people really of all different ages.
Yes.
We have people in our group all the way into their reaching 60 mm-hmm. that are still waiting for that one perfect person. And the interesting thing is this whole subject really came up when we started doing the Right One study.
Yes.
And I think you've been in that journey with me.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to facilitate that through a home group in the beginning. It became so popular that we ended up doing it in a classroom setting, mm-hmm. Which was pretty exciting, because then we could talk about it even bigger. And the interesting thing about this is that this concept about the soulmate tends to ruffle people's feathers.
Yeah.
And it really was a difficult subject for me as well, because I was one of those people that really felt like, there's that one special person out there that's just for me. And the challenge becomes that when you marry somebody and then things happen, mm-hmm. or it doesn't work out. My best friend, she feels like, well, I was married to my soulmate. Mm-hmm. And so what happened that we ended up divorced? I ended up in the situation where I was married to my high school sweetheart and felt almost the opposite way. Well, we had this disconnect, so surely we weren't soulmates.
Yeah.
So where is my soulmate?
Yeah.
And
that's the boat that I'm in. I'm just, I'm in that same boat saying, okay, I realized that was not my soulmate, and I'm pretty firm in that, mm-hmm. that belief in that, okay, where is it? Am I going about the right way? Or like you said too, some people who really feel like, okay, oh my gosh, I was married to my soulmate. Does that now mean I'm going to spend the rest of my life, just knowing that oh my God, I missed it, or I
That's a whole
messed it
bit.
up.
That's a whole bigger
that's hard.
issue.
Yeah.
That's a bigger issue.
Yes.
And we'll get to that in just a second. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, going back to what the reason why this is so crucial is because we feel a lot of guilt around it.
Yes.
When we feel like we're getting out there and really trying to make an effort to meet people and get to know people, there's that one train of thought that comes up of, oh, you don't need to be helping God. Just let God bring the right person into your life. You don't need to do anything. But then again, we have this other Christian book, which I'm just going to refer to the right one because it really does. And I had to go through it a few times, and I really think that God put me in that position of facilitating those studies so that I would have to learn it. And really, it goes back to what Pastor Jimmy Evans says. And I do agree with him now that he says that you need to get out and start looking, start meeting people, find people that share your values. And when you find somebody that shares your vision, because God's put vision in each of our lives for our own purposes, when our purposes are moving in the same direction and our Christian values in our alignment, and then we have some preferences in there too.
Yes.
And when those things come together, you start to build a relationship with that person. And when you make the choice to come into a marriage, now you've made a covenantal relationship that God can honor. And through that process, those two people become one flesh, because God says that the two people will become one flesh.
Yes.
And through that, not just that process, but also the process of getting to know each other and making the choice to build a relationship, to build a life together, the two people become soulmates. So I think Pastor Jimmy really drives that home. I truly believe with all my heart, and this is hard for me to say as a woman, that is correct. That we do create and become soulmates over time. It's not a situation where we're looking across a room and we see somebody and the sky's open and a dove descends on that person's arm and we think, oh, that's the person for me. Because a lot of times we're expecting that. And that's why we see so many single people revolving in the same single groups and coming to activities week after week, month after month, year after year. And as the years go rolling by, they're like, why haven't I met my soulmate? I don't know. And they have, and the reality is if you sit them down and talk to them, they have met some really good quality Christian people of the opposite sex at some point in time, but maybe they didn't feel that they were soulmates, or there was something that they didn't try to work through. I mean, this is something that if we just wait for that feeling, or we wait for that, that sign from God, and we don't try to build a relationship, it takes the element of responsibility out of it, because we're waiting for something to happen to us rather than making the effort to build something. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that, I think you're really touching upon expectations and what is reasonable expectations. What does that look like? And is there any basis for what Hollywood tries to show us as far as sparks flying and all of those things? And maybe sometimes people have felt like I felt that before. I felt sparks flying after I've just met someone. It may not be a glance across the room, but for some reason you start to talk to someone for a few minutes, and all of a sudden you start to, you, as some people say, the butterflies in your stomach, and, if people think that they've felt that sensation or have experienced that before, are they saying, oh my gosh, was that something that was totally made up in my head? That's not realistic. Is it something that engineered in my mind, or was that something authentic?
Well, let's talk about butterflies for a second.
Yes.
Because just like all these ideas are coming to my mind, because honestly, I mean, you and I have both been married before, and we both have discussed that, well, because that didn't work out, or because the way it went down, let's put it that way.
Yes.
It feels like that those people were not our soulmates, even though we knew them from when we were in school and we grew together and those things happened. So I don't think it was that, because after, even I can remember after being married, and you know the way marriage is, you have your ups and you have your downs. I mean, it's just part of life. And I remember having, even being married and still having butterflies at times for my husband. Not all the time, not even most of the time.
I can't say that, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just
I know,
thinking that there were times when we had some really good times. You know,
That's
I
good.
can remember one good year.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
Yes.
I know that sounds tough, but I mean, when you're young and you're, you know, you don't have a lot of money and all this stuff, you know, it feels like it takes a lot more effort.
Yes.
When you're younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just because we have more tenacity when we're younger, you know. I mean, as we get older, we're like, oh yeah, you know, it seems like we're not quite as tolerant.
Yeah,
and I hate to say that,
yeah,
but it's just, we don't seem to want to be as patient as maybe we were when we were younger.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, you know, because I think, you know, people have come to a certain extent saying, okay, I know now that's not exactly what I want. That's not what I want. You know, I may not quite understand or know what I do want, but I know what I don't want. You know, I know what it's not supposed to be. And we get that, you know, just like you said, just through life experience and just knowing that, you know, I don't want to experience certain things again.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just don't have the time for it.
Yeah, that's a whole different issue. But
yes.
I do want to throw this in there, is that, you know, in our case, you know, I think we both, what was it, your high school sweetheart, or was it somebody you went in college?
Yeah, college sweetheart.
Okay, so I mean, we were young, you know, early 20s or whatever, when all this was happening. And what I really think is that as we start to grow up, I think that we start to form our identity as we become adults.
Yes.
And as you start to form your identity and you're married to this person and you're doing life, and you know, one person's going to work, the other person's going to work somewhere else. If you don't make a conscious effort, a lot of times your lives grow apart instead of growing together. And maybe in one situation, one of you grew up and the other one didn't. That can happen really easily.
Yeah.
And so hopefully now that we're kind of in that over 40 age range, we have the opportunity to feel like we're already pretty settled in who we are and our identities, where, you know, where we're going, what our vision is for our life, and those sorts of things. Yeah. But coming back to the soulmate issue, I want to come back around to the issue of prayer and the idea of, you know, you don't need to do anything, just let God do it for you. But I came to realize the difference between Pastor Jimmy's book and another book that was just saying, you know, you don't need to do anything, just pray, is that Pastor Jimmy's book was written by men. 2 men wrote that book, and they have, you know, years and years and years of marriage counseling. Right. So they're basing this on the things that they saw wrong. And so it's completely legitimate. And the woman who wrote the book about allowing God just to do everything and just relax, I came to realize, one, she's a woman. And as women, we're not the pursuers.
Right.
And I think Pastor Jimmy was making the point, look, you've got to get up and you've got to get out there and start meeting people. You have to make the effort to date. You have to and I think to a certain degree, a lot of that is an instruction to men, that men have to get up and start taking their role as men.
That's right.
And us as women, don't write us the nasty emails.
That's right. Yes. Email.
We're just hashing this out, okay? Yes. We're just pretend you're here in my living room and we're hashing this out. That's right. So Pastor Jimmy is making the point that obviously the men we have to give the men room to get up and to be able to be the pursuers. Yes. And us as women, because we're dependent on the men to make the first move in most situations, it doesn't mean that we don't open the door or we don't leave those subtle hints, wink, wink.
That's right. Yeah.
You know,
drop the handkerchief.
Yeah. Exactly. That we don't make it obvious. But the point is that as women, we are in the position of praying and seeking God's face, but our responsibility is to get out there and to be available, and to make sure that people know that, you know, hey, I'm single, I'm going to, again, in the single adults program, I'm involved in these types of things. And and making yourself available. Because the reality is if all we did was sit at home and prayed all day and we never walked out the front door, there's not a way, other than if I want to marry the UPS man, there's not a way for him to get to me. You know, I mean, we don't even have milkmen anymore.
That's
you know,
right, that's right.
I'm dating myself.
It's all well, you both. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, good.
Yes.
But the point is so we do have a responsibility. I think it's both. I think we do pray, we do depend on God, but we also make ourselves available, and we get out there and we start mixing and mingling and in places where there's going to be other Christian single adults. And as we are doing these things, oh my gosh, we had this thing in Texas. I don't know where you're watching us from, but we're actually in Texas, and I'm really big about volunteering. I think volunteering is one of the greatest ways to meet people, because now you're mixing and mingling with people that have a willingness to serve. Yeah. And we're just getting done with Revive Texas, and Revive Texas is an outreach here in the Dallas area, and it's only a 50-day thing where we're going out. Anyway, I don't want to get all into the whole thing, but I realized that because it's ministered to out of a heart of love, that if more people got involved in Revive Texas, I guess I am going to put a plug in for them. If more singles got involved in that, and there were a lot of singles, but coming to that, because we're all coming with a servant's heart and the messages about love, just loving people, that we would have a lot more opportunities to mix and mingle with other single people that had the same mission and the same heart of God.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, you know, and just the way you've said it, doing our part here on earth, you know, we do mix, I mean, the word says we mix, you know, action with our faith, you know, and that's exactly what you just described. And I think, you know, the two schools of thought seem to be so polar opposite. But I think, you know, we always use the word as our plumb line, you know, and if we look at that and say, yes, you know, we do our part here on earth, but yet we still storm heaven with our prayers.
Absolutely.
I think that's the godly way of approaching it. And like you said, just position yourself the best way possible.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest challenge that we see in singles things is this back and forth thing, particularly in the over 40 range, because a lot of us have been married before. Yes. And so we go back and forth between, well, I think I'd like to be married, but I don't know if it's really God's will. And really what it is we're kind of pushing it off on God, as opposed to taking responsibility and saying, you know what, I would like to be married, and God, you give us the desires of our heart. So I'm bringing this desire before your throne of grace, and I'm asking you, Father God, you know, what do I do with this? Because you obviously put this desire in my heart, and I'm just going to say, I would like to be remarried, and show me where and how to go about meeting a person that would mirror my values and would have a similar vision and life, and how we can form a life together. I'm sort of ad-libbing this here, but I'm just getting at the point that we shouldn't be afraid to pray bold prayers.
That's right. Absolutely.
Because, you know, I mean, we're not afraid to ask God for a car or a house.
That's right. Yes.
So why would we be afraid to ask him for a spouse?
Yeah. And that's, you know, probably the most important decision that we're going to make. So absolutely, you know, I totally agree with that. And I guess if we just speak for a second to the ladies out there who really feel like they have, you know, missed it, or they're wondering, you know, hey, that guy that I met 10 years ago, you know, was he the one? And that, I was so busy, you know, with my career or whatever it was, that I missed it, or I didn't feel like I wasn't ready yet, you know, that I missed it. What would you really kind of say to that?
This is a really painful
easy question.
No, okay? This is a really painful subject, or what used to be a very painful subject for me. And I think this is how God kind of got through to me on this subject, because honestly, the first time I taught about what Pastor Jimmy calls the soulmate myth, I was offended, because I didn't want to believe that it was a myth. I was like, that's not a myth. I mean, there is a soulmate. There is somebody out there that's just for me. And in my mind, I really had an issue with him calling it a myth. And so because I was not bought into it the first time I taught it, I sat there and I just read directly out the book because I couldn't teach it. And then when the class got bigger and we were in a classroom, I was like, God, I can't fake this. You're really going to have to talk to me about this and help me to reconcile this in my mind. And God brought back to my memory. Oh gosh, I can't believe we're going to talk about this. Thanks, Laura. God brought back to mind a time in my life when I did meet somebody who I did believe with every ounce of my being that he was my soulmate. And I mean, it was kind of the way I described it. I was going to Christian, I felt like God told me to go to this, get involved in the Christian singles department at my church. I started getting involved, not at first, but I did start going to the events, started getting to know people, was mixing and mingling. And one New Year's Eve, or that New Year's Eve, a gentleman walked in. He was in from out of town, didn't know anybody. Over the course of the evening, somehow he was trying to connect. He thought I was the leader. I guess because I was standing by the door, and he got my number. And later on, I was like, what's that? And so anyway, over in the following weeks, months, we started spending a lot of time together. And I clearly felt like the Lord had spoken to me and said, that's your man. He's the one. And that's what we all want. We want God to say, that's the one. That's it. Go for it. And I honestly believe this with all my heart. And to this day, I still believe that God spoke to me. At one point, he said, I've got to go back. And he was from another state. He said, I'll be back in 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't feel right about questioning him, even though I felt like the Lord was telling me I needed to ask him where he was going and what he was doing. And the reality is some of the times when we were together, there was somebody from his past that would be texting him because it would pop up. He had one of those big phones and be like, and so I knew that there was something, somebody from the past. And he kept saying, this is somebody, that I've cut it off with, the whole 9 yards. When I didn't hear from him after that 3 weeks, I thought something in the pit of my stomach. I knew before I even got on the plane, something was not right. And and then perfect timing. Yes. Lighten up a heavy moment here. So I felt like I was doing some business with his brother, and I felt like I should reach out to him, send him a text message, left him a voicemail, and finally, about a week later, he sent me a text message, and he said, yeah, that girl that I told you that I had liked before, well, you see, we got married and it's been really hard, and I really appreciate your prayers. And I was just stunned. I was just stunned because I had really bonded with this person on a spiritual level. We had prayed together. We had gone places together. We had done life together. And furthermore, I felt like God had spoken to me about him. And so it really threw me into, I cannot even tell you, this whirlwind, this downward whirlwind of struggling with, how can I, I'm on altar ministry. I pray for people. I hear God for everybody else. I've been on prophetic teams and healing teams and all this stuff. How do I hear for everybody else, and I somehow missed it on myself? I don't believe that. And this is what I finally came to realize. And it took me almost 5 years to come to reconciliation with this. And that's torture, is that, but God had to work out a process in me. So there was a purpose behind it. But what God revealed to me is that God could speak to me and he could speak to that other person. And at the end of the day, we both have a free will. Just because God spoke to me and said, yeah, that's the one. And he even showed me at one point when we were going through all this, that the guy had thrown out a fleece asking God about me. And so I know God spoke to him. But he still had a free will. I still have a free will. And he made the choice to pick someone else.
Yeah.
And at that point, you have to respect that and let that person go.
Mm-hmm.
But it was probably one of the most painful lessons I've ever had to learn.
Yeah. I mean, I had something similar. That, we didn't go out for months, but about a year ago, I met a gentleman who I got introduced to through my old pastor. I shouldn't say old pastor, but it's my former church, I should say. And so, he was everything that he was just the perfect type. He was tall, he was dark, he was smart, and just, I was just, as I shouldn't say this, but I am, I had, my nose was open. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes, I said that. But anyway, but I was, I had the butterflies. I was like, oh my gosh, did I just meet my husband? And we believe the same things. He was a pastor. We just believe the same, crazy faith for the Lord, and just saying, oh my goodness, I am a radical lover of Jesus. And he's like, I'm right there with him. Like, yay, and it was the same thing. I mean, I quickly realized that he wasn't at a place where he was emotionally healthy. And then I found out he wasn't physically healthy either. And him, I guess, grappling with all of that, it didn't go any further. It was just a couple of dates and that was about it. And I'm like, Lord, okay, what happened here? God, why did I meet him at the point where he wasn't ready to receive, who I am? Because I'm like, his life,
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, you really feel bonded with that person.
Yeah.
Especially if you've prayed with the person. Yeah. And that's where I try to advise people not to pray with people until they get further along into an exclusive relationship with the person. And you've really had that conversation, because it's so easy to be hurt because you're bonding with somebody on a deeper level.
Yeah.
So
that happens. But I think, that the purpose in that, God was showing me that, there were still some things that I thought I had dealt with, some trauma from my marriage, and I didn't. I had some things that I still had a lot of shame and disgrace, quite frankly, over. And God kind of highlighted that to me, even in that brief time that I knew this particular gentleman. And so I really started to work on those things, and I'm very thankful for that. But I wish the lesson wasn't quite so painful as you say.
It was really painful, but you have a really good point, because what ended up happening is very similar for me, is that it ended up catapulting me to wanting to become a better person. Like it pushed me to work on my own healing.
Yes.
Like I got really involved in freedom ministry, probably for years, and peeling back the layers of the onion to get that emotional inner healing. It brought things up to the surface, mostly about rejection, the fear of rejection, dealing with rejection. And then it took me on a journey of allowing God to start loving me, or for me to even be able to receive the love of God. And God romanced me and romanced me and romanced me and told me and showed me how much he loved me.
Yeah.
And so now it's just, to me, I want everybody to experience that.
Yeah.
Because honestly, there's nothing that could replace the love of God.
Yeah.
Because when God starts to pour his love into us, and I think this is a good place to take this, is that as we start to take our eyes off of really just trying to find someone and focus our eyes on God, and how much, the only way I can say this is to start looking at the scriptures that talk about love, that God is love, and that perfect love casts out all fear.
Yeah.
And I really had to camp out on that scripture, because I had a lot of fear around stepping into a bad relationship. But as I allowed the love of God to minister to me, my love cup started to become full. And when God starts to fill your love cup, it's like you become impregnated with the love of God so much that it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, until you feel like you're overflowing, and you're like, I've got to put this somewhere, because it's overflowing. And it's because we've allowed God to pour into us. And I always like to say, you know what, we can't pour out of an empty cup.
That's right.
And so we can't even begin to think about stepping into a loving, godly, potentially marriage with somebody until we have something to pour out of, or to pour into somebody else, out of ourselves and into somebody else. And it comes first by allowing the Lord to love us, and only a way that he can do it.
Yes. And I think even just for me, just kind of wrapping things up, I guess one of the big takeaways for me was, I was like, okay, Lord, if he's not the one, and, you know, as great as I thought that he was, you know, oh my goodness, Lord, I'm having this wonderful, prayerful expectation of, you know, okay, I'm going to just have this joy, whether you think it's a soulmate or not, but God has intended for you to have joy in marriage.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think if anything else, if you just kind of camp on that and really kind of let that get into your DNA, I think that it'll help you to stay at a healthier place when you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I would say looking away from the perspective of fear and really looking at these issues through the eyes of faith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, fear tends to grab us and say, you know, what if I don't ever meet the right person? What if I did meet the right person, I somehow blew it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, that was kind of my fear, is that I somehow missed the boat,
Yeah.
because somehow this didn't work out and it's just over for me. And that's fear. And God's word says he has not given us a spirit of fear, but of a sound mind, self-control, and of power.
Yeah.
And that perfect love casts out all fear. And so I've really had to speak to that fear and say, no, God has a good and awesome plan for my life. God wants to prosper me. He wants to bless me. He wants to bring love into my life. God is love.
Mm-hmm.
And really focus on taking my eyes off of the fear and looking towards a faithful God who we know is good. God has a good and awesome plan for each of us.
Yes.
And when we keep refocusing back to faith and take our eyes off of the fear, we can move forward with a healthy expectation that whatever God has for us, it's going to be good.
Yes.
It's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it wasn't, you know, the person that we felt maybe God spoke to us about,
Mm-hmm.
but the reality is God is so limitless.
Yes.
There's no lack in the kingdom of God. And that's one of the things I used to get over that fear, is I kept telling myself, you know what, there's no lack in the kingdom of God. We serve a God of abundance, and God is able to do super abundantly above and beyond anything I could think, ask, or hope for. So God, I'm going to trust you that as the loving God that you are, that if somebody else made another choice, or if, you know, the soulmate that I thought was right for me is not, you know, is not the person, then you have someone else for me. And you're not limited to just one person.
Absolutely.
So
yeah,
I know that was a tough subject.
Yes, it was. That's okay.
It was a little intense.
Yeah.
But I have AC.
No. But I think, you know, that really fleshing this out and really helping people to kind of work through and press through it and really look at it from a different perspective and from God's view, really. That's really what our heart's intent, really help you look through this in a godly way, and to have that reminder that his plans for us are good. That I think that we've done a good job. So, yes, absolutely. All right. So thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, we're going to be talking about a woman's worst nightmare. So guys.
No, this girl's worst nightmare.
So listen up for next week, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we're going to be talking about the following week. We'll talk about transparency. Yes. All right. So take care.
Take care.